Just for today, everything's okay, everything's okay. Never comes again, another day like yesterday. Just for today, everything's okay, everything's okay.
Hi, everybody. I recently did an episode in which I talked about, or I stated that all of the mishigas, the insanity, the cruelty, the theft, the misery, the competition over resources, murder, etc., all manner of cruelty and pettiness and unkindness towards one another and towards other living beings, essentially 99% of the time, maybe all the time, came down to fundamentally that rather than being present to what the situation is in reality, that most of us are struggling with some deep unconscious belief about who and what we are. And when we engage situations and circumstances, what we're actually doing is we're trying to manipulate the situation and circumstance to have an outcome that disproves something we fear to be true about ourselves. Whether it's, I'm not worthy of love, and then we'll try to engage situations to get outcomes that prove to us that we are worthy of love. If your fear is, I'm a loser, nothing I do ever matters or works out, then when you engage situations and circumstances, rather than just seeing the situation for what it is and engaging it in a rational, reasonable way, you will engage that to try to force an outcome to prove to you that you're not a loser and that things that you do have value or work out, right? I can't prove this, but just after watching myself for decades and being a therapist for over a decade, I can tell you certainly in the therapy space, 99%, if not every challenge that's psychological or emotional is really the psychological emotional experiences people have, anxiety, depression, PTSD, is actually a result of there being a deeply held, unconscious belief about who and what I am within reality. Therefore, what I can expect from reality and what's possible for me to do within the situations and circumstances of reality. And so, as I've been talking this through with folks, an image or a metaphor came to mind that I think demonstrates it better than me theoretically in abstract language describing it. And it's interesting because this also tracks again to the trap that people get with narcissists or abusers, people who put you on trial for things that were never true about you. And when I see clients defending themselves, they'll even come in even when no one's present here, no one's accusing them here, and they'll spend a lot of their valuable time defending this accusation. And so it's interesting that freedom from narcissistic attacks and assaults has a lot to do with this as well. So starting with the presumption that most of the mishigas in the world and most of mental health struggles, really, those symptoms that you do in fact objectively experience, I'm not dismissing them, those symptoms come from the fact that there's a deeply held unconscious belief about what you are. That belief is always negative. It's always very cruel and very insulting and very negative and very limiting. And that belief operates and activates in different situations. It's always there, but operates and activates in different situations. And then people spend most of their lives attempting to succeed or manipulate outcomes in order to prove that what they're afraid is true isn't true. And this model or this image that I came up with shows how that's a fruitless endeavor. There's no point in it. So here's the model, and here's the message that I wanted to send out today. Let's say you have a car, and let's say you love the color yellow. I don't know. I just chose that. I don't know why. But this is not some bright, gaudy yellow. Let's say this is a soft, luminous, sun-like yellow, this car. This is the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. This car is just beautiful. Everywhere it goes, people feel happy when they see it. In fact, it almost seems like it uses less gas. It almost seems to just slide through the air. There's something just so beautiful and luminous and exceptional about this car and this beautiful luminous yellow that this car is. And you're sitting in your car, driving it down the road, and you stop at a stop sign, and some person says, hey, roll down your window. Roll down your window. So you kind of roll down your window, and they're like, hey, man, like, I'm not trying to insult you, but I got to tell you, that is the most drab, depressing, ugly gray color I have ever seen on a car. I have no idea why you would choose that. Why? It's so ugly. It's so drab and gray. Okay, there's a number of things that come out of that. The first and most important thing that you need to know is that person is literally delusional. That person is literally delusional. They're sick in the head because your car is this luminous, beautiful, shining yellow that anyone who actually sees what it is actually happier. This person is feeling depressed and gray and whatever, and they're actually accusing you of having a car of that color, and it's simply not true. It's not a fact. Okay? So let's go down a couple different roads. Let's say you get offended and you argue with the person. What are you talking about? My car is not gray. It's a beautiful, luminous yellow. Everyone loves it. And the person is like, those people are full of shit. Like, what are you talking about? They're just being nice to you. It's not. Like, if you were being realistic and level-headed at all, you would see how ugly it is, and you shouldn't be inflicting that on people. And you could have a long argument. Here's what's important in that situation. If you engage in a debate about what's true with someone who's sick, who's projecting some sickness in their own head onto a situation and pretending something is true that isn't true, right? That person is literally living a lie, and they're trying to make this lie true. And if you're arguing with them about whether it is or is not true, there's two things that are actually true. One is you don't know what's true, or you wouldn't argue with a crazy person about it. You don't know what's true, or you wouldn't argue with a crazy person about it. Number two, if you argue, even if you're arguing something that's entirely factually, objectively untrue, if you argue the truth or not of it, you will experience the grayness of that. Now you're in a gray reality because you're having an argument about whether or not your car is gray. You could be protesting and saying it's not gray, but the fact that you're arguing it will make your reality grayer. Okay, this is important in relationship to narcissists because narcissists do this all the time. They'll make these unreasonable accusations towards their victims. That's nothing more than a projection of who and what they are and their sickness, and they'll project it onto someone and they'll make that accusation. And people who get caught in arguing and defending, you even look at the overall context of the thing. The rest of society may not know what's true. And so suddenly the topic of grayness as attributing to you is a thing. And now you're experiencing grayness, and you're experiencing people who are like, well, I don't know, maybe this person does have a gray car. I don't know. Maybe we should interact with them as if they have this dull, depressing gray car that they're imposing on society. They don't know. So now you're in this debate with the narcissist about whether or not something is true, which is why I'll take a little detour here and tell you, when a narcissist or when someone makes an accusation that is patently false, you never debate it. It's not about taking the high road. It's because if you debate it, you make it a reality that you experience, that they get to experience as if it's true, because why would you be arguing it if there wasn't some possibility that it's true? Why are you defending yourself, right? Someone who knows that their car is this luminous, beautiful yellow thing that makes people happy, when that crazy person comes by, you just be like, well, okay, sir. And you just keep driving. You'd be like, wow, that dude's out of his mind. Right? So this brings out this another really important component of accepting what's true and never debating or arguing what's true, is that when you debate or argue what's true, when an accusation has been made against you, you join the people who doubt you, because you're now in dialogue with people who think that it may be true, and you're in dialogue, and you have now established a dialogue. So you're now in relationship to the people who see you as something that you're not. Right? So let's say you're like, okay, that's fine, John. Like, you could just drive on and be like, oh, that guy's crazy. But what if that guy goes around to all your family? And by the way, narcissists do this to people. They'll go around to everyone you know and present your reality and your emotions and your scenario, and present situations and conflicts you've had with the narcissist in a light that makes you look crazy and makes the narcissist look clean. And then people in that system will begin relating to you as if the lie about you is true. So people could be right now be going like, hey, John, like, that's fine. You can just be like, oh, they're crazy and move on. But these people can destroy your situation for you. Okay. I want to be straight with you and tell you that I was the recipient of this kind of program in the extreme for the entirety of my childhood and most of my adult life. My brothers and sisters to this day believe things that are deeply untrue about me. They believe my abuser, who was cruel, who then lied about everything he or she did, continues to do everything that she can to normalize all of it. So when I'm describing this to you and giving you this advice, I'm not saying it as someone who just didn't experience the damage of it. It's like, oh, you'll be fine, just ignore them. Right? So if you hear me, when you hear me saying this, giving this advice, this is not coming from someone who never experienced it and is like, oh, you'll be fine, just ignore them. This is coming from someone whose life was destroyed by the lies. And my relationship to my siblings was destroyed, and I was isolated. I was basically driven out of my own family, alone into the world to deal with anything that came my way alone, because even if I went for help, it was going to be framed as all of these lies by my abuser. And my siblings were going to relate to me as if those lies were true, and I was not going to be able to access any genuine, honest kindness or support, because they were never and still are never going to believe. In fact, to the length that a couple of my siblings actually pay lip service or admitted, because it became almost impossible to deny one of the events, that yes, it happened, but still talk, like one of my siblings talks around it and makes excuses for it as if it isn't really the horror that it was, right? So I'm not saying this from a position of a therapist who never experienced any of those things. It's like, oh, you'll be fine. I'm saying this as someone who spent from 0 to at least 40, 45, if not a little bit longer, living in the isolation and living in the lie. And by the way, part of that was that I made the mistake that I'm talking to you about. I continued either in actual dialogue or in my own head. At some point, once I was isolated and was estranged from my family for 15 years, the dialogue was still in my head. I was still spending all of this time disproving to myself and projecting those accusations onto other people, meaning expecting them to think those things about me, and then heavily coloring my relationships to people who had no idea and didn't think those things, because I was in an argument in my head with a very sick person who had tried to make things true about me that were actually true about her, not me. Right? And I'm human, so I have lots of shitty, wacky things that are true about me. But the things that she projected were 100% her. Right? So I'm telling you, I'm not saying this from some privileged position. I'm saying this from someone who experienced a life that was largely tiny and empty and impoverished and emotionally and psychologically destroyed for decades because I made the mistake that I'm warning you about. Right? This sort of like took a turn and is going into the narcissistic thing, but I'll bring it back to the image of the luminous yellow car and really what this is all about. So you can say, hey, John, what if this crazy person goes around and poisons your whole community? Okay, I completely experienced that, and it's still true. My own siblings still don't really know and will never accept how sick the things were that happened and the person was who did it. Right? It's completely normalized there. I have in-laws who think that I created the situation. It's whatever, right? Who have no idea. The reason you don't argue it, the first point I made was when you argue it with that sick person, you experience grayness. You have this luminous, yellow, beautiful, shining car, but when you argue with a sick person who accuses you of you having a gray, ugly car, you experience grayness. Your life becomes about grayness. So I'm telling you that again. I was estranged from my family. I chose to exit and go, I'm not going to be around people who believe these things, blah, blah, blah. It didn't matter. It was inside me. And now my entire life was dominated with this argument between me and other people, or when there are narcissistic, shitty people who might have thought shitty things about me that were not true. Suddenly, I was projecting all the power of my abuser onto them and acting like I was having the same experience, but it's like, no, that's just some idiot. Whatever. So this is why the first point is you don't engage it, because when someone accuses you of having a drab, ugly, gray car and you argue the point, even though you're arguing counter to, you experience grayness as your reality. You experience grayness as your reality. Okay? That's the first point. The second point, you don't go around arguing it. You might very assertively say, you're wrong, you're confused about something. My car is luminous, yellow, and beautiful. But that's it. Put a pin in it. Like, don't continue, because the reason they continue to argue and debate and pick and throw up is because as long as they can throw up enough smoke, they can create a sense of grayness around you. Right? The second reason is you could say, oh, these people can turn people around you. This is a much harder lesson to learn, because there are going to be good people who are your friends or family members who you like, even love, etc., etc. But here's what's really important. Anyone who's really interested in you or cares about you, at the very least is going to come and say, hey, I need to air this out because I'm hearing this information and I want you to have a chance to state your side of the situation. But people who will just willfully believe what an abuser tells them about you doesn't know you and never knew you and doesn't have a real relationship with you and never did and is never going to. And you might love them and you might feel a sense of familiarity and history and you might have had many beautiful moments with them. But if they are incapable of recognizing how severe and significant that lie is, right? In my case, again, I'm a human being. I have many fucked up things about me. But the things that my abuser was accusing me of were literally the opposite of who I was. For example, one of the constant accusations was that I exaggerated or I lied or I made things up. From the time I was a little kid, I was compulsively truthful. In fact, because of those accusations, I became even more compulsively truthful, especially when it hurt me or I had to admit something that put me in trouble, blah, blah. I was compulsively truthful. And anyone who knew me, my friends in middle school and high, anyone who knew me knew that that was true. So if there are people who believed that I exaggerated or told lies or made things up, they never knew me in the first place. Because exaggerating, lying, or making something up was never my issue. I have lots of issues. I'm a human. I have lots of serious issues. That wasn't my issue. You know who was lying, exaggerating, and making things up? My abuser. Completely fabricating things. Completely erasing very significant events. So it was being projected onto me. So here's the message again, right? Again, I'm not saying this as someone who didn't experience it. I'm saying it because I experienced it and still experience it to this day. You cannot and should not argue the point, or you cover yourself in the grayness they accuse you of. You're now in a debate. You're now on trial. This is why you never debate or defend against a narcissistic attack or accusations or untrue accusations. You can state what's true and move on, but if you get caught in the arguing and evidence and this and that and blah, 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 all you do is surround yourself with grayness. You experience the grayness and other people see it and go, well, maybe it's true, right? And the second reason, the second point that I was making is the people who are willing to believe it, people who are unwilling to even come and just go, hey, this truth is being communicated to you. I wanted to hear your side and know what you were experiencing. The people who are not willing to do that never knew you. Never knew you. They never knew you. They don't know you now, and they're not going to know you, and they're not interested in knowing you. Because if someone is willing to accept something so stunningly untrue about you, especially because these things are always negative, without even considering their own fallibility, the possibility that you're being attacked, the possibility that someone's just erroneous and didn't understand what happened, well, like anything, accepting that you have a reality that you live in and truths that accompany you as a living being. If they have no capability of considering any of that, there's nothing to be done or said. Let's say you manage to convince them and pour evidence on them and blah, blah, and they're like, oh, yeah, I guess I didn't realize, the person who abused you is probably a bad person. They don't have the ability of insight. They're not seeing things as they are. They're now just being coerced by you to believe something because now you're applying psychological and emotional pressure. So all they're showing you is that they're the kind of person who will be swayed with whatever. And the moment you step away and other information comes in, they're going to be swayed again. So they're showing you their inability to actually perceive your true nature. And you can't fix that by coercing them into going, oh, I really am more truthful. Because they're not basing things on their ability to perceive truthfulness, they're basing things on, oh, I got emotionally coerced and I'll just give in to that. I'll give in to the narcissist. I'll give in if you say it. It's like, oh, okay, you can be friends with that person if you want to, but you have to understand who they are in this iteration of their life, right? This is sort of like the rom-coms. Some of the rom-coms I really can't stand because a couple of reasons. One, they make everyone idiots. But two, historically, this is not necessarily so true anymore, but historically, rom-coms portrayed women as the dumbest, most lacking in insight. I mean, it was wild. Like if you think about how women are portrayed in a lot of rom-coms, right? Think about, okay, there's a woman and she has a fiance and maybe he's not quite attuned. He's a little narcissistic and selfish and blah, blah, blah. And then her true love comes in and they're aligned and blah, blah, and she falls in love with her true love. But then she feels really confused and then she decides to cut it off because she said that she's going to marry this person. And she commits to that, but then her true love comes in and makes some big dramatic, romantic display. And she's like, oh, I'm overwhelmed. I'm overcome. You're right. You're my person. She breaks it off with the fiance and she goes with her true love. How disgusting of a depiction of women is that? That's ludicrous. You're literally making someone look like a 5-year-old child who has no idea who anyone is, can't make up her own mind, and just responds to a bunch of chocolates and balloons. Like, are you fucking kidding me? That's not who my sisters are. That's not who my wife is. That's not who my daughter is. That's wild. That's wild that we consider that normal. That's presented as romantic, that somehow women are so emotionally overwhelmed by their own emotional propensities that you can just put on some big demonstration to convince them of what's actually true, and that she's so confused about this, right? Not wanting to leave someone that's not right for you. That's just true across genders. That's difficult, right? We commit to things, we invest our time and emotions, we question our instincts. Okay, that's just normal. But you're literally presenting someone who operates like a 5 or a 7-year-old who has to be overwhelmed with the romantic demonstration in order to figure out what the fuck is actually true for her. That's not accurate of women. Women are just human beings, right? There are level-headed ones, there are insightful ones, there are idiots, there are psychopaths, like whatever, they're all of it, right? Okay, so to come back to the point, if there are people in your reality who can be convinced that your car that's luminous and yellow and beautiful and shines like the sun is actually depressing and gray, and you're offending people by depressing them with this, like if they can be convinced of that and then they can believe that, and then you can go to them and convince them that it's actually yellow. They don't actually know that it's yellow. They're just giving in to you. And then when the other person comes back around, they'll give in to them. Okay, so now you just know what you need to know about that person. Right? This sadly applies, in the case with people close to me. It's like, I finally healed, got level-headed about what happened. I know what happened. I know that it was horrific. I know it was very, very wrong, and I know that it had nothing to do with me, and I'm not responsible for any of it. Now that I know that, I could have a very direct conversation and probably with some time sway some people in my, close family circle to go, oh yeah, like blah, blah. But that changes nothing. Because all that's happening is I'm doing to them what my abuser did to them, which was to just bullshit them and use a way of speaking that has emotional authority and a sense of surety to it, a confidence in what's being said, to present a reality that sways them. Well, that doesn't do anything. That's just me coercing them into believing something that I want them to believe, the same way that my abuser did, right? The truth is, what happened was blindingly obvious, was not confusing at all. It was black and white abuse, things that no child is ever responsible for. And the accusations that were made to cover it up are literally the opposite of my personality and the way I was and have been ever since I was a little child. So if people believed that for decades, and then I'm able to be very level-headed and reasonable and not speak in an angry tone, convince them of something that's slightly different, more in the direction of what I say is true, they haven't changed. They're still the kind of person who doesn't actually know what's true and isn't going to do the hard work to find out what's true and to truly know you and to come to you and go, look, I think this is who and what you are. I'm hearing these things, like, what's going on? Can we talk through this? How does this work? Right? So even if, let's say you're driving your luminous, beautiful yellow car around town, and enough people go, oh, what a beautiful car, what a beautiful car, so that finally most of society goes, yeah, beautiful. They don't know whether you have a beautiful car. They don't experience it. They have their own noise in their head. They have grayness in their head, but like everyone's saying that your car is a beautiful car. So now everybody's like, oh, yes, beautiful car. And they come and they befriend you because they're like, oh, you have a beautiful car. They're not your friend. You can be kind to them. You can love them. You can care for them. Like whatever. They don't know anything. They just swayed with public opinion, right? Like in my case, if I were able to sway people and there was a shift of public opinion now, that doesn't heal that relationship. Because it was stunningly untrue for decades, and it was deeply believed because someone put forth this propaganda, just utter rot propaganda. And then if I use the same techniques and tools to convince someone of the opposite, and enough people get on board and that person shifts, it's like, that's not a trustworthy person who does their own work to clear their own mind and their own body and to be emotionally, psychologically clean and even so that they can have a chance to see who you really are and consider. Like, we're all fallible. None of us is perfect. I have biases and perceptions and things that are untrue. I'm not saying that we have to have perfect perception. But what I'm saying is when things are stunningly, obviously untrue, and it's an incredibly black and white situation like severe child abuse is, the people who believe it, it's the same thing with all this shit that's going on, right? It's like people who make excuses for Trump being a child rapist. There's nothing to be said. That's just who they are. Like, if you wait, right, you see these people fleeing Trump's administration, you know, and then suddenly they're like, I was wrong. And it's like, yeah, as long as it served you, he was right and you worshiped at his feet, and then he shits on you and your life sucks, and now you need other people to sort of prop you up and accept you again, and suddenly you're like, oh, you're right, he's crazy, he's a bad person. It's like, nobody can trust that. Because this isn't about perception or discernment. You're not a discerning person. You're just doing what works for you and what's convenient for you, right? So your perception of a thing isn't based on the hard work of whether it serves you or it doesn't serve you, to go, this situation is blindingly wrong. It's stunningly obvious, black and white obvious, that this person is very sick and is a cruel and self-centered person who does not have the best interests of other people at heart. That's blindingly obvious, and it has been for a long time, right? So the point again is that there's no value in arguing with people if you go, oh, if there's a crazy person who sees your luminous, beautiful yellow car that you're driving around and says, this is a gray, drab, ugly car, why did you choose it? It's depressing to look at. you can go, oh, I have to rebut what this person says because other people are going to believe it, blah, blah, blah. What I'm telling you is it doesn't matter, because those people who are willing to believe it without applying any sense of discernment or emotional responsibility or psychological responsibility to going, do I know that this is true? Does this seem to line up with objective truth? Have I examined it? Have I honestly gone to that person and said, hey, I'm hearing this thing, what's going on with you? And then they look at your car and they're like, well, it really does look luminous and yellow, so I guess that person's crazy. If that person has no discernment, it's not about being angry at them or judging them. They don't know you. There's no relationship to be had. Any dynamic is just based on some BS in their head. Any dynamic is just based on some BS in their head. Especially if they can't even hear. Let's say it's a complicated situation, and maybe there's two sides to the story. But if they're unwilling to even from a neutral place hear your side, that person has no investment and no emotional responsibility towards discernment. And they are not trustworthy. Even if you can convince them, the convincing will only be because it's comfortable for them in their head and they feel more comfortable believing what you're telling them. They don't actually hold themselves responsible to know what's true. They're going to make shit up in their head and they're going to follow that as long as it's comfortable. This is why you don't argue and debate, for those two reasons. One, because once you engage the argument and debate about whether or not your car is gray, you experience grayness. And two is because people with real discernment who are worthy of an open and genuine relationship with you, a reciprocal relationship with you, would never approach you as if those things were true without applying their skills of discernment and to go, is this what's going on here? If they're unwilling to do that, whether they sway one direction or not is irrelevant. They're only making themselves comfortable in their heads. Right? As my abusers age and exit, it will become more comfortable for the people who participated in the lies and believed the lies to shift and allow the truth that I put forward to have more ground. But that heals nothing. That solves nothing, because it's only convenient for them. That now there's no longer any consequence to standing up and applying and taking responsibility and applying some real discernment to the situation, even being willing to investigate. I'll go, okay, maybe there are two sides. Let me hear your side from a neutral point. If that never happened, that person does not truly know you and is not willing to allow you to be present in the dynamic. That's why there's no point in arguing it. Okay, I went really psychological and went deep into relationship to the narcissist and abuse and blah, blah, blah. But I want to come back to the original point, which is far more important. This stuff is more about negotiating it as a human. And I get into that because I'm a therapist and I deal with this all the time. I have to counsel clients who are the victim. I have to try to help people apply their ability of discernment in situations where I'm not there. I don't know what's actually true or not, right? I can only help people and develop and strengthen their discernment. So let's come back to the original point. If it is objectively, factually true that you have this vehicle that is luminous, this soft yellow, sun-like, beautiful color that makes people just joyous and happy when they see it, and that's factually true. If there's some crazy person who says, why do you drive that gray drab car? It's depressing and you're being irresponsible. If you truly know that your car is luminous and yellow and beautiful, you don't argue it. There's no point in arguing it. This person's crazy. When someone makes something the opposite of the truth, they're not doing it because they are incapable of perceiving the truth. They're doing it because they have a deep and powerful investment in the lie. They're not trying to discern the truth. They're just serving the lie because that lie makes them comfortable, and they have a deep and powerful motivation to remain comfortable. They don't care what's true. They only care what makes them comfortable or what helps them avoid their fears, right? So this comes back to the crazy person is only navigating, they're using situations and circumstances to try to disprove something that they're afraid is true about them. And they think that if they can make you drab and gray, it will alleviate them or relieve them of believing the negative thing that they believe about themselves. It's not going to work. It doesn't work. It never works, right? So there's no value in arguing it. When you argue it, all you do is experience grayness, even if you're protesting that your car is not gray. When you argue grayness, you experience grayness. There's no value in arguing people who have no discernment and have no emotional, psychological responsibility. They don't know you. They don't want to know you. They're merely comfortable in believing what makes them comfortable and what allows them to think about themselves in ways that makes them avoid fears about themselves. Right? So let's come back to the more powerful and beautiful truth. I've said this before, in all the years that I've been a therapist, when people come in, the depth of their mental health suffering is always exactly equivalent to how negative and vicious their beliefs are about themselves, who and what they are. You hear me? You got to hear this. When people come in, the intensity of their mental health issues are always correlated or equivalent to unconscious or conscious beliefs about themselves, who and what they are. And it's always negative and cruel, with the possible exception of schizophrenia and bipolar 1, which have organic components, right? But most of the people who come in just suffering anxiety, PTSD, depression, which, by the way, I've suffered terribly with all of those. So again, I'm not speaking on this and criticizing you or judging you. I spent decades in those states. Those states almost destroyed my life. What's doubly interesting is that when people heal, not once does any of them ever go, oh my God, now I'm healed and I realize I really am a worthless piece of shit. Oh my God, it's such a relief to admit it. I really am a loser who's ineffective and unable to succeed at anything. No one ever says that. Do you understand the significance of this? This isn't some simple statement. Every single person, including myself, who I ever see heal, doesn't become arrogant and egotistical. They become at peace. Whoever and whatever I am, it's okay. I just wasn't all those horrible things that I believed about myself. And they begin to get a sense that there's something beautiful. They are something beautiful, mysterious, powerful, creative, and loving, and joyful. Every time. No one ever heals and then goes, oh my God, I realize I'm a piece of shit. Ever. Do you understand what this means? What this means is the negative beliefs are always a lie about you and everyone, including Trump, Idi Amin, Hitler, Netanyahu, whoever. The negative beliefs they hold about themselves that drive their cruelty are a lie. They're driven by trying to disprove these lies, and they do horrific, cruel things to other people because they're using reality and they're using other people to attempt to disprove something that they unconsciously believe about themselves. Everyone, all the mishigas, all the insanity is a world full of people trying to solve negative beliefs and trying to negotiate negative beliefs and trying to disprove negative beliefs they have about themselves. But those beliefs are not true. Those things are untrue. There's nothing to be argued. There's no debate to be had. And there is no external situation that will make it true or make it untrue. It's simply untrue. So like the person driving the luminous yellow car, there's nothing to be done other than to enjoy your luminous yellow car. Well, that person's sick. If they can't see that my car is luminous and yellow and beautiful and joyful, I can't help them. There's nothing to be done. I can't argue with them. There's nothing to be done. If they convince other people, there's nothing to be done with those people. Because if they willfully project some terrible negative belief onto you, they're choosing to believe something untrue for their own motivations. And that's not your purview. That's not within your power. It's not for you to tell them, oh, that's a stupid thing to do. You shouldn't do that. You're suffering and full of misery, and you believe negative things about you. And now you're projecting it onto me, but you need to deal with your negative. There's no point. If they're not ready to hear it and they don't want to work on it, no point. There's nothing for you to do other than to drive around in your beautiful, luminous yellow